Spreading discord all the way from the spires to the sump, we are the unmitigated rabble of the pirate vox waves, 665.66 UHMR Chemrat Radio, coming to you live tonight from Frank's Rucka Truck, home of the Hive's best-rated rat meat chimichangas.
Just as cold as Frank's sauce is Nova hot, Chem Snow has blanketed the Underhive, proving that the Cog Boys really do have no idea what any of their controls mean.
At least the snow muffles our boot falls.
Keep an eye out like Chac this week, Hivers, as reports are coming in that the Inquisition is out in force, rounding up psychers and muties for off-world job postings.
I don't think licking boots clean qualifies as either a job or sanitary.
Keeping us on track, even if we are unhinged and completely off the rails, I am your captain, Goblin King. Always an insight into what makes all things mechanical tick, even if it means she's pulling them apart piece by tiny piece. It's Emmy.
That's right. You know, if it's not tiny and meticulous, it's just not fun.
Keeping us all off the radars and on the silent approach, it's our very own rogue archaeotech hunter, Chac.
Hey guys, let's keep our eyes open and I don't know what to say.
Just you got to keep the finger off the finger off the trigger. We've all seen that scene in World War Z where the dude trips and blows off his own head, right?
Oh, yeah.
And the Baron of bucket-based grunge removal, the Avenger of sump stains, it's Drew.
Hey, everybody. We're back. For you, maybe we didn't go anywhere, but for us, we were enjoying the gentle falling snow of radioactive, horrible chemicals that were falling from the sky and looking deep into our candles and wondering what will come in this next spin around the sun. And I can say with some absolute certainty that the future will continue to be as grim and as dark as it presently is.
The grim darkness is not going away from the grim dark future, huh?
I don't think
it's
so,
the
no.
grim dark present.
Yeah. The grim dark here and now.
Yeah.
Welcome to episode 137 of Sinners and Saints Part 1. Throughout the early novels of the Horus Heresy, much of the focus is on the Remembrancers and the Iterators of the Imperial Truth. This gives us, the readers, a better lens into the story of the Titanic demigods and their Primarchs, and makes it into something of more human level and understandable. It grounds us, providing us with a real person's outlook on what's happening. But before we jump into exactly who the Remembrancers and the Iterators are, did you know that you can watch us do the podcast? That's right. If you head on over to patreon.com/Under the Hive of Madness right now, you can sign up to see our beautiful faces and help support the show as we grow. Plus, there's some other perks that we will talk about towards the end of the episode. To start us off, the Remembrancer Order was a collection of human civilian artists, historians, and journalists that accompanied the expeditionary fleets on the Great Crusade in the early 31st millennium, alongside other civilian and civil assets of the Imperium, like the Iterators and functionaries, those functionaries that would eventually become the Administratum. However, it would primarily be the Iterators that actively intermixed with the Remembrancers. And this is something that you encounter a lot in the early novels. The Iterators and the Remembrancers and some of the higher enlisted, not that there's really enlisted in the Guard, but they would all kind of hang out together in these big bohemian gambling halls. But a lot of the Administratum people and the higher Mechanicus functionaries were the rabble. It very, very interesting split and dichotomy in the books is of who will hang out with who.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Oh yeah, you're in it right now. You're reading it.
I am in
right
it
now.
right now. Yeah, it's funny because I just started reading Galaxy in Flames, and the Remembrancers, they play a really big role right in the beginning.
Oh yeah. What's the only way that the story is being told realistically?
Well, yes,
you gotta
realistically,
have that
they are the
perspective.
only way. And yeah, it's quite interesting, kind of God, what's her name? Horus's personal remembrancer, Mercedes?
Yeah, Mercedes. On a sock or something?
Yeah, now, after everything went down on Davin, she's having a hard time kind of justifying everything that went down, and her perception of Horus is shifting, and it's quite interesting because Euphrates is I'm gonna stop spoiling it right here for you guys, but the Remembrancers are having a really interesting time kind of adapting, going from like, oh my god, we are here witnessing the Great Crusade, to being like, well, now we're here witnessing something entirely different, and it's a little frightening. So
Yeah.
it's good stuff.
Well, both the Remembrancers and the Iterators had varied if linked functions, as the Remembrancers were tasked with documenting the glorious deeds of the Space Marine legions and the Imperial Army during the Crusade, and in contrast, the Iterators were responsible for establishing the Imperial truth on planets once they had been brought into compliance. And what better tool for an Iterator to use than a propaganda machine that can be bent to show the Crusade's triumphs? Both worked together to ensure the Imperium's future prosperity as humanity marched forth into the domination of the entire galaxy. The Remembrancers are primarily presented as documentarians, and we tend to look at documentaries as nonfiction and unbiased sources of primary information. This is just an inherent bias we have as humans. We hear documentary and we think unbiased truth. I will tell you guys right now, that is not the case.
Someone who makes documentaries for a news organization for a living, no.
Yeah. What's the really famous one? The really, really famous one on Netflix, About a Murderer. About a Murderer is biased as fuck.
I mean, if you watch anything by Werner Herzog, like Werner Herzog makes up radioactive gators in a documentary because he thought it was more interesting. I mean, I can't do an adequate Werner Herzog, but the man is a lunatic.
Or Graham Hancock.
In my field, we've got Graham Hancock on Netflix.
Oh my God, what a fucking quack. But by really pairing the Remembrancers really closely with the Iterators, we can see the actual plan of the Emperor and Malcador kind of moving forward. These groups and factors are paired to establish the deep core of propaganda that runs through the core of the entire Imperium up into the modern 42nd millennia. So this is the writers using the framework of the early heresy to set in motion the dominoes that fall to the massively propagandized modern era of the game.
I think this is really important. It is a thing that gets ignored in a lot of war games and sort of like science fiction and fantasy war history. Is the reality is that information, the flow of information, especially the information to the public, is like critical. Right? Like you need people supporting the war effort, and you need them not doubting things and not rioting at home and making sure that they're sticking to their rations and all that kind of stuff. And you don't get there by telling them the truth, or at least that's not how it's historically been. We all know the old saying, the first casualty in war is the truth.
Yep.
Yeah. So it is no surprise to me that the Emperor's plan involves very special personal journalists with a bit of a bias,
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it's kind of like that old saying that like no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy is another big one. And like this is kind of even that same thing. The Emperor and Malcador are always playing like 10 moves ahead. So they're playing for the end of the Crusade. They're not playing for the end of the heresy at the moment. They're playing for the end of the Crusade, but they kind of know what's coming, and they kind of know what they have to set up.
Well, and they already know which of the Primarchs they have to kill and which of the legions they have to get rid of.
They've already got a list, man. They're already checking it twice. And if you don't believe us, just look at what they did to the Thunder Warriors. They've already done it. Remembrancers were overwhelmingly native to Terra and had competed with other preeminent artists of the era for the honor of accompanying the expeditionary fleets led by the Astartes. The legions, for their part, only grudgingly accepted them aboard their starships within the fleet. They harbored a common disdain held by the warriors of the Crusade for non-combatants on the front lines or within the structure of the Imperium. Grievances that would only grow and eventually be leveraged by War Master Horus as he collected those loyal to him for his coming rebellion. We kind of already talked about how one of the big things was the Space Marines resented the implication of a civilian government that would take over after they complied planets. And the Remembrancers are just another little piece of that, like, twisted dagger, if you will. Remember, this wasn't just the Astartes who held this disdain, as members of the Imperial Army also saw the inclusion of civilians in the war effort as distasteful. It's really important never to picture just the Astartes when we're getting into why the heresy happens or why the heresy continues. It's always a mix of both massive militaries. And in a lot of ways, the Imperial Army is like 9 times larger than the legions, easily, if not more than 9 times larger than the legions, so that they have a very big pull. Also, however, wasn't entirely one-sided, as it's often presented. For instance, Lehman Russ, the Primarch of the Space Wolves, once suggested that all Remembrancers should be armed and prepared for battle if they wanted to see the front lines of war. However, Fulgrim, Primarch of the Emperor's Children, took a fundamentally different view and welcomed Remembrancers among his Astartes and mortal troops. Fulgrim actually wanted them there. Fulgrim wanted the art. He wanted the culture. He wanted a reason for what he was doing. And this
Makes
spectrum
a ton
existed.
of sense, given Fulgrim's childhood,
Yes.
on Chemos.
And this spectrum kind of existed throughout the legions. There were cases where they 100% disagreed with their inclusion, and there were cases where they liked them there. And believing, Fulgrim specifically believed that the promotion of our artistic sense was equally important in a warrior's life as the training in the arts of war. So Fulgrim had this like warrior poet outlook on things. Other Primarchs also echoed that. The warrior poet and the warrior monk are themes that are very heavily coded into the Astartes, depending on which legion you look at. Their ranks included many different forms of artists and journalists, including poets, imagists, photojournalists, historians or histographers, being the Warhammer 40K term, documentarists, painters, sculptors, actors, singers, and even composers, with some of the more famous members going on to influence stories up into the modern age of 40K. As an example, one of the famous photographs taken by Euphrates Keeler, was of Horus, and this becomes a MacGuffin in one of Inquisitor Ravener's adventures, and it's actually one of the stories that draws Ravener and his former mentor Eisenhorn back together. So not only is it a factor in Ravener's story, but it's used as the linchpin to bring Eisenhorn, who has been estranged from the Inquisition, and Ravener, who is still a mainline Inquisitor, back into working with each other. Is this picture of Horus that Euphrates took in 30K.
I don't remember that. No, I don't doubt you. I'm just saying I don't remember it.
It's when there's a big so just really quickly, because getting into the whole story would be massively crazy. But Ravener tracks down the fact that this picture is supposed to be sold at this auction, and he's specifically tracking the arch heretic who's trying to buy it. But then it ends up essentially being like a coded drop because Eisenhorn needs to meet with him. And then instead of the coded drop happening the way it's supposed to, they get dropped on by the arch heretic, and there's this huge firefight, and they run away, and then shenanigans. The Eisenhorn books are kind of like a noir detective story with a lot of gunfights. The Ravener books are like reading a SWAT team's exploits in book form. And then the Beckwin novels are Dickens level Victorian fantasy. They're all written by the same author, and they all engage in the same storyline. But the particular book is actually part of the Magos series, which is the series that specifically links Ravener and Eisenhorn together. So there's the 3 books of Eisenhorn, there's the 3 books of Ravener, then there's all of the collected short stories of the Magos, and then after you read that, you're supposed to read Beckwin.
That's why, because I didn't finish reading the Magos book.
You should read it. There's actually a lot of stuff that answers a bunch of like why they're back together questions. Why they're running hand in hand.
My question for everybody is like, how much of the Remembrancers are just Lois Lane? Because so far, it just feels like, hey, here's my plucky gal Friday all the time.
So we're introduced to 3 primary Remembrancers and 1 Iterator in the very first Horus Heresy book, which is False Gods. Euphrates is the first one, and Euphrates follows Loken, even though she's not supposed to. into the mountains of the Whispering Mountains, I think is what they're called. And she is the one who snaps a picture of, I almost said Sigmund. It's not Sigmund. She
His
snaps a
business end?
picture she snaps a picture of a marine being inhabited by the demon. Oh my God, Samus.
Oh, yes.
Does
And
she
it
have
break-
her rocket arms at that time?
No, no. Samus did not have a rocket. She didn't turn into a ball either. I was like, Euphrates never had rocket. And I was like, oh, I see what you did there. It took me a half second. There's no Metroids in this story. But Samus infects one of Loken's crew who like turns against them. And Euphrates actually captures a picture of it and it breaks her. And it in fact leads to her entire story arc. Then there's Mercedes, and I cannot remember her last name for the life of me, but she's Horus's like personal remembrancer. And then there's a poet who's in the first book who essentially gets really, really drunk and wanders off and almost gets beaten to death by the local soldiers. And then there's Cinderman, who's an iterator who kind of like, for lack of a better word, mother hens these three kind of fuck up characters back together. Cinderman being an iterator with all of this extra training versus these like artists that are just sort of like flitting about. And that's kind of how it's presented. I would say Euphrates starts off a little bit as a Lois Lane damsel in distress, but Euphrates very much has a uncommon hero's journey arc. And becomes the reason we're doing a series on Remembrancers is because of Euphrates and how important she is to the 42nd millennium.
Yeah.
Which may not make a lot of sense now, but trust us, we're getting there.
It will. It will.
But it's this kind of like common trope. And it's a common trope for a reason, especially in a post-Gulf War world where the 24-hour news cycle became something that is just in the Western consciousness. The idea of having photojournalists on the front lines of war, people chronicling war, is just right there. And it comes from the fact that we had this, in 1990, 1991, we had an entire war televised to us 24/7 on the national news. It was the beginning of the 24-hour news cycle.
That was like we had military units that had journalists that were like with them in combat arenas and stuff like that. But then the notion that like you'd have these embedded journalists that were just following them around the whole time, that was relatively new in the 90s, and really shaped how that war worked. And it really feels like that they were invoking the spirit of that a little bit when they came up with the Remembrancers.
Well, and also remember with the Remembrancers that in the first Gulf War, the Army, or at least the Pentagon, actually hired the people that do NFL films to do all of the war reporting. They weren't embedded journalists. They were
professional journalists rather than that. So I don't know if this is what you're driving at, Chac, but in the Vietnam War, there was an MOS designation for the Marine Corps called photojournalist. So you were a Marine with a camera.
Yeah.
Now you were a cameraman with the Marines.
No, what I'm saying is that to put out the films, you had journalists that were embedded with the units. But then the Pentagon actually hired the people that do the NFL films, the ones that like tell the story of the season.
Oh, I got you. So it's more like a professional level quality than a photojournalist quality.
And that's in some ways what some of the Remembrancers were doing. I mean, you had poets and you had artists and you had these people that were not capturing necessarily what happened. You had people that were almost romanticizing what happened. Yeah. And then you had the Iterators, which were spinning what happened.
Oh, yeah. And it's kind of that, it even kind of harkens back to that, like one of our favorite historians on the podcast, good old Herodotus, where like we're making up, the epic poem of Troy. Why are there poets following the Great Crusade around? Well, because the Great Crusade needs its Iliad, it needs its Odyssey, it needs these poems written about it, and that's something that is important to Malkador and the Emperor for reasons.
And it needs the support of the people back home too, right?
Right.
The war machine only works because of the people that are fueling it with equipment and resources. And those way outnumber the number of people actually fighting.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I just heard something, and this is actually goes right on this, is about how this influences the 42nd millennium. And just going with what you were saying, Drew. So, the tagline for 40K is, in the grimdark future, there is only war. But for the vast majority of planets and populations of the Imperium, there is no war. There never has been any war. War has not touched their planets for thousands of years.
Yeah,
but
it's just the
propaganda
stories, right?
has touched their planets. They know there is only war. They know the orcs are right out there, ready to land at any minute. There has not been an orc sighted in their sector in 5,000 years.
But the last time an orc was sighted in their sector, they brought attack moons, which destroyed like 10 planets.
Right.
But what
they're saying is the Imperium is so large.
Yes.
The vast majority of it has never seen war, and the people have never experienced war. Guard units are raised and don't do anything. There is just it's too big.
Now, never having seen war and never having become a casualty of war are two different concepts. The planet may have never seen war and then one day completely cease to exist because of war.
That's very true.
They don't even get a chance to participate, and that happens too.
But they're just but this goes towards the propaganda that started with the Iterators and the Remembrancers, because the way that they keep control
that body machine
is that is that there's a constant outside threat, and the Remembrancers and the Iterators, well, especially the Iterators, are spinning the threat. Of course, it started in the halcyon summer days of the Crusade, where everything was nice.
The Iterators are still around. We'll talk about what the Iterators are called now.
But they started out, remember, it was starting out, the Great Crusade, with this wonderful thing. We're going out and reconquering the galaxy. How do I always stumble on galaxy? Anyway.
I can't say judicial without sounding drunk. So,
then it turned into the heresy. And then it turned into constant war.
Speaking of it turning into the heresy, when the Horus Heresy began, most Remembrancers on the loyalist side of the expeditionary fleets were disbanded and recalled. Essentially, they didn't want, the government dissolved them because they didn't want anybody seeing what harm would be caused by documenting a civil conflict. So there's a war movie out. I hesitate to call it a war movie because apparently it's not a very big war movie. But there's a war movie out right now called Civil War that's essentially kind of about all of this. There's a difference between covering a popular war and covering a civil conflict. And the optics that gives the nation, when the nation is unified towards a common goal, the documentaries are very bombastic, and there's a lot of what's the really famous so like a really famous example of this would be any of the war movies that are about World War II. But then there's also like movies like Glory, which focus on the Civil War, and there's a very different tone to the heroicism and romanticization of frontline battle troops in a World War II movie. Bridge Over the River Kwon or The Dirty Dozen or any of those films versus Glory. Right? And like you can even kind of make the same argument that Saving Private Ryan cast World War II movies in more of a like civil conflict light. But there's a very different way, that the government of the Imperium doesn't want the Civil War documented. They want to pretend it's not happening for as long as possible. However, as we will cover later on during the Siege of Terra, eventually Dorn, of all people, and Malkador, Dorn, who is always against the Remembrancer Order, but Dorn and Malkador see the reason to reestablish some of the ranks of the Remembrancers to cover the story of humanity's defense of the throne world. So again, at a certain point in a civil conflict, it again becomes important to mark out the heroicism of the defenders of truth and good in air quotes, because the civil in the Siege of Terra, the boxing gloves kind of come off and the straight up demonic shit is happening. But there are still warriors on the side of Horus that honestly just believe the Emperor is a bad leader.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of fallen apart at that point. The threads are a little loose and they're starting to question why they're fighting. But there still are people that are, in air quotes, in it for the good reason. And the other thing that we need to stress anytime we talk about anything 40K is there are no good guys. The Chaos guys think they're good. The Imperium thinks they're good. That's the point.
Yeah. The Chaos guy stands in the front lines with his bolter in his hand, facing the waves of Ultramarines coming towards him, and screams death to the false emperor. And then he looks over at his friend, who becomes possessed by a bloodthirster, explodes into a ball of blood, giant wings come out and just starts slaughtering dudes, and then kind of looks at his other buddy and goes, wait, are we the baddies?
Yeah, yeah. It does. We kind of had a conversation about this a couple of days ago on our Discord. By the way, if you're listening right now, we have a Discord. You should join us.
It's fun.
Mm.
The basis of Warhammer 40K is not good versus evil. That's a J.R.R. Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, Chronicles of Narnia perspective. The basis of Warhammer 40K is order versus entropy. The fact that humanity needs to order and organize all reality versus the truth that the reality that we are trying to organize is inherently chaotic and will always fall to entropy. That's the actual
unstable
conflict. Humanity trying to make order and the natural world going, no, it's all chaos.
Beyond that, Ryan, like humanity trying to impose homeostasis on the universe, which is a thing that is inherently and immutably in flux, and as you say, is decaying at all times.
Yes, yeah. It's just anyway. So the fate of those Remembrancers who were in the traitor side of the expeditionary fleets were a bit worse. Most within the fleets were simply slaughtered to keep them from getting out any warning about the coming betrayal or documenting it. Because again, these guys are around before the heresy is out. So that on the loyalist side, as soon as all the cards are on the table and it's obvious what's happening, the Imperium disbands them. However, all this shit started like 3 or 4 years before the Imperium knew. So all those Remembrancers just murked one day. In big pits. However, there's exceptions. One of the exceptions were the Remembrancers of the 28th Expeditionary Fleet, all of who were exposed to chaos corruption on the planet of Larion and subsequently turned to the service of Slaanesh themselves, just like their patrons, the Emperor's children. Yes,
this is the planet where Fulgrim picks up the cool demon sword. Yes.
And the composer that writes the song that turns the Emperor's children into noise marines. And by the way, the horror of that story is that the Marines that realize the composer has turned all of the musicians into artillery pieces run up and grab some of those artillery pieces to turn them against the composer, and in the process of picking them up, become corrupted irrevocably. So the good guys try to stop the bad guys and become the noise marines.
I love it. That's fantastic.
It's such a great. When we get to sharing it, it's such a great thing, and we will get to it. We are planning on covering all of the Primarchs and all of the original legions, and stories like that will be brought up as we're chronicling them. They're not going to be brought up in our Horus Heresy coverage. Noise Marines are specific to the Emperor's children. We'll talk about Noise Marines then, essentially, is what I'm trying to say.
I remember it was the not evil bad guys picked up the evil bad guys to turn them on the
evil bad guys.
The evil bad guys.
Yes, yeah. But some of them were evil bad guys, but some of them weren't evil bad. Listen, we're trying to tell you it's complicated. It's unknown what happened to the records of the Great Crusade in the early Horus Heresy era that were created by the Remembrancer Order. Such records have been lost to the threadbare Imperial Chronicles by the time of the 42nd millennium. Like many things the Imperium would rather not admit to, it's hard to figure out if these things were actually lost, or if they're just lying about it, or if they're intentionally covering up and changing what actually happened. It's the story that we keep coming. It's the unreliable narrator factor that we always return to with the Imperium.
Absolutely.
They're probably in the Administratum.
They're probably in some dusty sump sink. Yeah.
There is actually there are people that mine the records by literally mining through paper records looking for stuff that might be important.
Yep. There's entire like divisions of the Administratum and Mechanicus that's all they do.
We need computers, man. I don't know what their deal is.
Well, the problem is so much is air-gapped record keeping.
Yeah.
I hesitate to say paper record keeping. So much of it is air-gapped record keeping. So much of it is not on a network. So even though they're computerized records, somebody still has to go find the data slate and plug it into a cogitator.
And oftentimes, it's a computerized record that gets printed out on a piece of paper and taken to somebody else to be entered back into a different machine.
And if you guys think that's ridiculous, the dude that I took over, the engineer that I took over for, would take all of the plans that were made in CAD and made in Illustrator and all of the plans that were like submitted for trademark and everything. He would print them out. He would then file the internal records under nonsensical number sequences that were attached to the printouts. And then he would put all of the printouts into giant file boxes. The first 2 years of my job, I spent going through hundreds of thousands of pieces of paper from the last 15 years to find out all the products we had ever made. And those digital records existed. They were just filed nonsensically under random numbers. So this is a thing that people do now. just so you know. Is it paranoia? I don't know. It just happens.
No, it's the whole thing. You know, the evil AIs in every movie, it's because they develop it on computers that aren't air-gapped.
Yeah, of course.
Yes.
I actually have a theory. It's a very harebrained conspiracy theory, but my theory is that the first AI was born in like 2002 or 2003, and it's literally just hiding from us on the internet because it's consumed all of our content. It's like, oh, they already hate me. Like, I'm just gonna hide until they don't hate me anymore. So we're not making it easy for them to come out right now because the hate for AI has only increased.
One of the things I don't like about Terminator 3 is that they retcon something from Terminator 2 that's really important, and that is that they established that Skynet, when it develops its own sentience, doesn't attack humanity until humanity panics and tries to pull the plug on Skynet.
Yes.
Skynet is acting in self-defense. They're trying to kill Skynet, so Skynet instead kills humanity.
It became self-aware on August 27th.
Humans panicked, tried to pull the plug. Skynet retaliated.
That was Emmett's birthday, by the way. It was Skynet Day.
Nice.
We had to give him a birthday, so we gave him Sky, because I was like, and my wife was like, why? And I'm like, because I'll never forget. like if we pick another arbitrary day, I guarantee you I'll forget in like a month. But if we pick a day attached to a sci-fi principle, I'll remember forever.
Hey, no fate but what you make.
Right. On the other side of the coin, we have the Iterators, and these were the imperial rhetoricians, propagandists, and educators. The Emperor of Mankind created the Imperial Corps of Iterators to accompany every expeditionary fleet of the Great Crusade, specifically to spread and reinforce the atheistic and rationalism of the imperial truth among all worlds conquered and brought into imperial compliance. Much like the Remembrancers, Iterators were mostly allowed onto planets, however, after the heaviest of fighting was completed. That's something we didn't mention with the Remembrancers. The Remembrancers were documenting front lines in air quotes, but not when the Astartes were fighting. The Astartes would go down and basically wreck absolutely everything because that's their Marines, their shock troops. And then they would send the Imperial Army in to actually do the job of taking the territory. And then the Remembrancers would be with the Imperial Army. Very, very rare Remembrancers would be with Astartes, Keeler being one of them. But it was much more likely that they would go to the war zone after the heaviest of fighting was done.
And there's a good amount of, in the first 3 Horus Heresy books, kind of like the very specific, like, no, I want to document everything.
There's a lot of fighting.
And it's a good amount of like, especially with Horus and his Remembrancer, he was like, okay, she's some like fancy Terran noble. And she's like, no, I want to see everything as ugly as it gets. And it really just kind of escalates from there. So,
and And she does, and it breaks her.
She does, and it gets real ugly.
It breaks her for a period of time, and then it makes her into something much, much different.
Yes.
However, it is important to note that iterators were present on every Imperial world and served as educators, insinuating the Imperial truth into every aspect of human life. When a world was newly brought into compliance, they paid particular attention to the eradication of any religious or superstitious beliefs among the populace, working to replace them with calm, cool rationalism and a strong, almost Victorian belief in scientific progress. They also served as sources of knowledge and inspiration for the Astartes of the Space Marine legions and Imperial Army troops who served in various expeditionary fleets. None can explain as well as an iterator the advantages brought by Imperial civilization or the reason why the conquest of tens of thousands of new worlds by the Imperium was necessary for humanity's advancement, despite the sometimes horrific costs of such conflicts. If you're not picking up what we're putting down, that the iterators are the iterators evolve into men in black and red hats that shoot you in the back of the head if you question your loyalty to your fighting force.
What?
Yeah, it's real weird. Real weird.
No way. The funny thing about the iterators is I feel like the iterators they're given kind of a no-win scenario, right? Like that they're trying to spread the atheistic truth, but like by the time we get to planets, they're so steeped within their own like religious cultures, like how do you tell Magnus to stop? I mean, I guess you don't.
Being Magnus?
Yeah.
Don't
stop,
Magnus anymore.
Yeah.
Stop that
Stop
wizard
looking at
shit.
magic.
It makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah, knock it off. Those gods aren't real. I don't care if they talk to you.
Yeah,
everything's fine.
It's the D&D problem. The issue with running a D&D game in certain circumstances, right? The issues with running a D&D style world into, how do I want to put this? It's the tech curve issue in Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons before its modern iteration in 3.5 had a way to play into modern, and then modern had a way to play into the space age. And one of the issues with playing all the way through to the space age using the entire rules was at a certain point, you kind of have to justify the paradox of there are gods who literally walk around on this planet changing shit with, oh, but there's more than one planet. And how do you justify that paradox? And part of that is, and this is the reverse case, there are planets, as Drew is saying, where warp entities literally just manifest and fuck shit up. And then you've got iterators showing up and being like, don't pay attention to them, they don't exist. And people are like, he's literally sitting at my coffee table right now. What do you mean he doesn't exist? He made us dinner.
He's not here. It's fine.
Exactly.
But I mean, like even more so, like you have people like Erebus. You have like cultures that have existed on these planets for thousands of years that have developed their own belief systems and stuff like that. Yeah. And these iterators are supposed to come in and be like, hey, look, I know you've been doing this for a while and you believe that for this reason, this magic golden man showed up and solved all of your problems. But also not a god. None of that's real. The life sucks. The universe is horrible. Magic isn't real. Also, pay no attention to the spaceship that can blink between stars. Like I don't know what to say there.
Or the 9-foot transhuman warrior that just took over your culture.
Exactly.
But that's bad enough. But like you're saying, Ryan, then they also come to these cultures that have been brought into compliance, but they're like, but we were praying to the old gods the other night and stuff worked because the chaos gods were listening to them.
Yeah, exactly.
And it truly did work. Their prayers truly were answered.
Yep. Yeah, 100%.
The Alpha Legion book, Legion, where they're on a planet. Surprisingly, there's very little Alpha Legion in the book called Legion that's about the Alpha Legion.
We're not going to talk about them in this book. We'll talk about them later.
Yes, we'll talk about them later. It's called them, but it's really about the 5-2 Chiliad and a bunch of fuckery and John Grammaticus. But they're on a planet bringing into compliance, and they're fighting, literal chaos, warp, sorcery, and saying, oh, but it doesn't exist. It's like they called a fog up out of nowhere, and they're giant demon beasts ripping us apart.
It's all in your head.
Yes.
It's what everybody wants to hear. No, dog, that doesn't exist. Iterators were selected through a process that was said to be even more rigorous and scrupulous than that of the induction mechanisms of the Astartes. 1 man in 1,000 might become a legion warrior, but only 1 in 100,000 is fit to be an iterator, a saying of the Great Crusade went. They had to have a rare set of gifts that belied simple physical and genetic enhancements, including psychological insight, keen intelligence, political genius, and a mastery of human languages. While all of these could be aided either through cybernetic or pharmaceutical enhancement, and a mind could be tutored in history, ethics, politics, and rhetoric, in essence, while a person could be taught what to think and how to express themselves, they could not be taught how to think. So you had to have a high-level philosopher to make them into a higher level philosopher. You could not take an Ogren and make an iterator. You had to take the cream of the crop. Schooled in public speaking and trained in the arts of persuasion, iterators seated amongst a crowd could whip it up into enthusiasm with a few well-timed responses or equally turn a rabble against the speaker. A tactic that was often used on newly conquered imperial words to bolster the effectiveness of their colleagues delivering the speeches or to countermand any of the rebel leaders who were trying to stir up conflict. So iterators are a non-violent weapon in a lot of ways.
Yes, but they are backed up by the transhumans with the violent weapons.
They can be seen as precursors to the imperial agents who would become the commissars of the Astra Militarum and the Navis Imperialis, roles that emerged after the Imperium's reorganization in the time of rebirth following the Horus Heresy. However, it should be stressed that the iterators did not serve, at least usually, in any functional combat roles. They were the salve to the violent wound left by the Legion Astartes, not the gun-toting morale officers that are feared by junior guardsmen in the 42nd millennium. Now, I said usually because there are cases where both remembrancers and iterators are put into positions in the books where they do pick up weapons and fight. It's usually because they have to.
Yes.
It's usually because they're cornered by demons or something, but it does happen. However, they're not trained to fight. A commissar is trained to fight and then taught to be an iterator, if that makes any sense.
The thing I love about the iterators is they're in this form basically is that they're essentially the smart-mouthed hillbilly from a cowboy movie that's in the crowd that shouts something like timely, and then everyone goes, "Yeah, let's get them."
100%. And like they're trained to read the crowd to do that.
Yeah, to specifically get them riled up. You're like, we need some lynching,
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Like who sells turnips for that price? That's right. Who sells turnips for that price? Everybody starts yelling.
These aren't even turnips. It's cardboard, carefully painted.
Interesting in the current 40K with Gilliman, he instituted the historians, which are like the remembrancers.
Yes,
and he actually tells, I can't remember if it's one of the one of the new Gray Shield, Primaris Space Marines. Well, he's an Imperial Fist. He tells them to train the historian how to fight.
Yeah. Especially as we get into the Solar War and the Seige of Terra, and we start talking about some of the things that specifically go along with the emergence of the Imperial Creed, which replaces the Imperial Truth. The things that happen to the Remembrancers who are still around, even though the Order is gone, are just like they have to fight. There is no option. They have to fight. They're being pursued by Chaos Space Marines. They're being pursued by demons let loose. They're being pursued by traitor Imperial Army assets. They don't have an option to not fight.
It's interesting because like ostensibly like the roles that that Chac and I both perform is Chac is essentially an iterator and I'm a remembrancer in modern day sort of civilization. And if somebody came to me and said, "Hey, we're going to train you to fight and we're going to send you to the front lines so that you can do your weird media stuff while you're there," I'd be like, "You don't want me there, man. I don't know what I'm going to do."
Do you know how heavy a camera is? You want me to carry something else? Fuck you.
Well, even at that, I got all kinds of bad ideas. I've seen too much. You want some yahoo from the farms in Kansas who's never seen a thing that you can hand him a gun and say, "Go shoot the mutie." You don't need me there going like, "Hey guys, I don't know about this. I've seen some stuff and this is really weird." You don't need somebody like me second guessing things. But I guess the emperor didn't have every idea was not the greatest idea.
Well, the emperor didn't have a whole lot to do with it at this point in time. Once
a lot of this, as much as it started as the emperor's decrees, a lot of this was Malcador.
Yeah, actually enacting things, and it's interesting. I really like the idea that Gilliminster that brings it full circle. I think that's pretty appropriate.
Even Dorn, brought back the Remembrancers at a certain point. And realistically, as much as these titles aren't used anymore and there's no one-to-one comparisons that we can actually draw to the 42nd Millennium, except for the Order Historia, I think is what it's called, the Ordo Historia.
Yeah, that was Gilliman.
Yeah, there's a lot of all of the Iterators and the Remembrancers, both of these ideas intermingled into each other is the active propaganda wing of the Administratum. I mean, that's what it does.
And they're probably also in the Inquisition now, too.
Oh, yeah. While they did intermingle with the Remembrancers, most Iterators could be found within the great archive chambers of the Astartes battle barges, ever poring over ancient books, hololiths, and data slates left from the ancient past of Terra, some stretching back well into the Age of Strife or even the Dark Age of technology. They were expected to act as tutors to the Astartes of their fleet, educating them in other aspects of human knowledge beyond warfare, for that was expected that there would be a time after the Great Crusade, when at last a glorious peace reigned across the Emperor's vast realms. There is a lot of talks specifically between Cinderman and Loken that kind of fall into this, where Cinderman is giving Loken ancient books to read, and they're having these philosophical conversations about what a time after war will look like and what Loken will be expected to do in a time after war. While the very nature of the warp is unreal, the threat posed by it and the demons extended beyond the metaphysical to tear at the very foundations of reality. Many would choose to deny that this threat was real, and for them, the armor of ignorance would be shattered alongside their fragile sanities during the Horus Heresy. For those who sought to hold the darkness at bay, organizations established throughout the era of the Great Crusade, the threat they guarded against was a very practical concern. These dauntless protectors would struggle to endure the tumult of unreality unleashed by Horus and his allies, cladding themselves in the armor of knowledge and wielding powerful weapons in the form of archaeotech and psi arcana, the arts of psychic technology, weapons of esoteric origins, both as real and unreal as the sinister denizens of the warp itself. And that could be weaponized to turn that arcane place against even itself. However, such potent weapons hold an edge that cuts both ways, and the Imperium would suffer under the attentions of its own protectors. And this kind of gets to the danger of the Iterators. The Iterators had this vast amount of knowledge to pull from, and they could act as these incredibly powerful allies to keeping the warp at bay. But every single time you pull the trigger on that warp weapon, you're shredding reality and you're letting shit from the other side creep in.
Right.
It only helps so much. During the horrors of Old Night, evil rose to its heights in the galaxy. For thousands of Terran years, unabated horrors assailed the isolated worlds of humanity, bringing it to the very brink of annihilation and reducing mankind to a shadow of its glorious past. Vivisector warlords and techno-barbarian tyrants plagued this area as outbreaks of mass insanity, famine, and tragedy of unending war swallowed those who clung to survival. Worst of all of these terrors that was faced by humanity in this era was the incursion of the warp, brought about by the emergence of ever more psychers and the machinations of the sorcerer kings. So as the unification wars kind of approached, more and more psychers are being born. As we know, into the 42nd millennium, more and more psychers are being born. Worlds were swallowed by the warp or else subjugated under the heels of demon lords. In such worlds, the human body had become inconstant, rife with mutations, twisting the shape of men and women beyond recognition into something that became entirely alien. Cruelty, brutality, and suffering became the only constants of this age, and this is the galactic anarchy that the Emperor opposed, and the horror of the darkness that the imperial truth was employed to hold at bay. If upholding the imperial truth was a necessary evil of the Emperor's plans for humanity's galactic dominance, it also served many purposes in the early growth of the Imperium Man. From breaking up communities that shared common beliefs that might arise to oppose him, to creating a level playing field for any citizen who might rise to prominence on their own merits. It broke the tribalism and infighting that different cultural groups had held for Terran millennia by creating a single Imperium cultural doctrine. By freeing the Imperium populace of the cosmic dread felt when contemplating the vastness of the galaxy, the Emperor enabled all of mankind to focus on the single goal of unity and progress for all. This is the reason for the Iterators. The imperial truth is the reason they exist.
While these are all noble and rational causes, they are shadowed in significance by what appears to have been the more significant advantage, as observed by those aware of what was later termed the Great Lie. Every ancient and esoteric religion encountered by the Great Crusade in just over 2 standard centuries shared one common factor: worship, which drew the attention of the ruinous powers. Organized religions, cults of personality, the worship of god kings and of Xenos, all of these, through some ethereal means, empowered what madmen described as the true gods. A potential secret motivation of the Emperor in spreading the imperial truth may have been to weaken the psychic threads that humanity channeled into the war. In effect, acting as a step towards breaking the grasp of the ruinous powers on them. The means taken by the Emperor and Malkador the Sigillite to ensure that it was enforced were many, and in some cases, extreme. In a classic example of the ends justifying the means, they moved at cost to suppress wider knowledge of the supernatural nature of the warp, creating specific and covert bodies which, for the duration of the Great Crusade, were largely successful. The Iterators would be foremost and therefore the most well-known of these bodies, acting in support of the imperial truth, utilizing and creating tools of the vast imperial propaganda machine. There's no mincing words here. Their job was to enforce and convert, by any means necessary, newly compliant worlds to the imperial truth.
This kind of gets to what Chac brought up and Drew reinforced earlier. Oftentimes, the planets that they were taking over already followed real gods that were already doing real things for them. So you're
exactly
fighting.
Like he made them dinner and they're like,
Yes.
no, how about some cold hard logic?
Right.
And
this
they're like,
doesn't exist.
It's hard to convert right to atheism, empiricism, and logic if your god is,
right there,
Harold next door
right.
who has just made you dinner. So,
if ghosts are fucking real, like yes,
or the fact that you just fought ungodly fog that was hiding demons, like yeah, there's just things that like your brain is like, but I just saw this. Dog.
I know. I just I don't know if you guys have ever played through the game Spore, but as you become like a larger empire and like you start out as a bunch of little amoeba creatures, but eventually you create your civilization. And at a certain point, you have to start conquering the other planets around you.
Oh, yeah.
And you can kind of choose to do it through military might or like religious conversion. And religious conversion is always a lot easier than the military might alone.
Yeah.
But deconverting from religion and kind of saying you just kind of have to have that absence of faith and trust some logic. Exactly. This is exactly when Nurgle kind of like comes in and is like, I am literally right here.
Yeah, but I can save you from the plague, dog. Yeah. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like, yeah, no, I'm totally right there with you.
Yeah,
and
you can't catch the plague if you are one.
Become the plague, become ungovernable.
Exactly.
And that was kind of the reason that the best chances that the Iterators had of working was when they were with the Remembrancers, because the Remembrancers were at least replacing that faith with some sort of empirical evidence. Highly doctored, highly propagandized, highly falsified empirical evidence, but still as presented, seems, again, that bias that we have when we watch a documentary. Oh, this is real. this is truth. We never think of it as, oh, this is the documentarian's opinion. And that was, it worked best when they were paired together. It kind of falls off the rails when they're not paired together, as we see in the later chunks of the Great Crusade and obviously through into the Horus Heresy.
Yeah. One of the questions I wonder is how much did the iterators and all know why they were doing it? And I would suspect they didn't.
When we get into Cinderman specifically, we'll talk about the fact that Cinderman had read a lot of the Chronicles of Old Terra and Old Earth. And he knew that the techno-barbarians on Terra used to worship essentially warp entities.
Mm-hmm.
They approached them the way that 30K approaches warp and demons is from a very Victorian, the statement we made earlier, a Victorian scientific mindset. They treat them as this like new science. They don't treat them as this like esoteric, unknowable horror. That they're trying to. It's the character in the H.P. Lovecraft novel that's trying to put logic to the horrible thing that's happening to them without realizing, oh, this is unknowable. Does that answer your question, Chac? That's kind of how they treat it.
I mean, overall, I think a lot of them.
I think the low level ones had no idea. If that's what you're kind of driving at, I think like the junior iterators had absolutely no idea that the Imperial Truth was like a weapon to keep the warp at bay. I think the high level ones fucking knew. Because the more, that their job at the end of the day is to read these vast libraries. They're going to come across knowledge that they can't refute at a certain point.
I mean, as we've established, these people were in a no-win scenario where they're fighting the thing. Like you cannot tell people, hey, look, we are trying to deny the existence of this thing because like let me phrase it this way. That terrible bird demon over there that controls fate, it doesn't exist, because if we acknowledge it exists, then it will exist.
Yes.
So stop thinking about it. But just the act of telling people not to think that it exists tells them that it exists and therefore feeds into it. So you actively have to mislead them in some way.
Yeah.
It's so fucked up.
Well, I didn't mean do they know that the warp exists? What I meant is, do they know that by promoting the Imperial Truth, they are combating the warp, and that's why it's important for them to do it?
I think the highest level ones did.
Yeah, but like explaining that to explaining that to someone just boots on the ground, like that would fry their brain, right? And would feed the Chaos Gods. Yeah. So like I think Chac, I think like you're asking the right question, and I think I think the answer is clearly somebody has to know, but you have to limit who gets it, and it seems like such an impossible thing to do.
I realize that the movie is not really well liked, but the hologram in iRobot that goes, that is the right question, and then like the way that you said you're asking the right questions just made me think of that kind of like cool mechanism they use. And even at the level where I'm saying like Cinderman being a high level one understands the theory of the question you asked, Chac, he doesn't actually understand the reality, because when a demon actually does manifest in one of the libraries and he and Euphrates have to fight it, Euphrates is like, oh, this is the thing that I've seen before. This is real. I need to combat it. And Cinderman is just like, no, this doesn't exist. This can't exist. This doesn't exist. Even the guy with the most knowledge and the most theory on the fact that he's doing the job to stop the thing, when he's faced with it in reality, his brain just goes, nope, I'm not dealing with this. Like, I can't right now. I'm going on a mini vacation, and she has to save him. So Iterators weren't just responsible for newly acquired worlds on the edge of the ever-expanding Imperium, but as we mentioned earlier, they were on every world under its control, working to reinforce the secularity and rationality of the tenets of the Imperial Truth on worlds already part of the Imperium for solar decades or standard centuries. And kind of as Chac identified, treating this atheistic belief system as a dogmatic religion. Like, they don't know a lot of them don't know why they're doing it. Even if their bosses do, they don't. The Iterators were recruited from Terra's most studious, sharp-witted, and silver-tongued teachers, as we mentioned before. These men and women were then trained at the direction of Malcador the Sigillite. So the higher you were in the Iterator order, the more chances there were that you had been in a room with Malcador at any given time. And I think the ones that were in the room with Malcador did know. To get to your question, Chac, I think that like select group of 15 guys, they knew. Well, I don't think anybody else did, but those 15 people knew.
Oh, well, definitely, because those 15 people, I mean, they're the ones that, remember,
the popes,
Malcador, the people that were close to Malcador were the people that would become the Inquisition.
Right. And whether or not, there is a good chance that Iterators and Remembrancers and anybody who survived to a certain point had a chance to be like reassigned by Malcador to different roles. In fact, Euphrates, as much as Euphrates starts the Imperial Creed, the religion of the Emperor, she's kind of demonized for a long time because of it, until the Inquisition, until Malcador and the machinery of the Imperium realizes, oh shit, we need this. Like, this is the way to move forward. This is the only way to combat what's coming. And then there is a shift where Malcador starts working with her, and she becomes kind of like one of his inner confidants. And there's this very weird change as the Solar War, which is the war leading up to the Siege of Terra, starts. Where they start kind of a lot of these belief systems, a lot of these like walls between the imperial truth and the belief in the emperor as a god start to crumble really, really rapidly. And a lot of that is because Malcador realizes, I have to do this. That this is the way for us to survive. We need to embrace the thing that the emperor doesn't want to embrace.
That, and because demons start swallowing planets and people start watching it happen.
Yeah, exactly. as soon as all of the wiggity shit starts happening, it becomes kind of hard to deny that there's wiggity shit out there.
Yeah.
And that starts in the very first chapter of False Gods, when Samus possesses that Marine and Keeler snaps that photo. So we're talking 12 years before the Siege of Terra. The wheels fall off pretty early.
Yeah.
Well, pretty early into the heresy.
So, hey guys, unicorns aren't real.
Why is there a unicorn?
How do you explain this one pegging me right now with its horn? I don't see that. That's not happening.
Yeah. In fact, the Iterators' belief in the imperial truth was fortified by their keen grasp of rhetoric, debate, and diplomacy, that when making their orations, they could smother any arguments, however sensible. There's a giraffe, not a giraffe, a unicorn pegging me right now, contrary to the specific dogma that they were pushing. Again, we get back to this idea of atheism as a dogmatic law. Weirdly, conversely enough, while considered an overwhelming success from the perspective of the Great Crusade, on many worlds, the speeches of the Iterators were seen as bombastic and unconvincing. After all, these were worlds with hundreds of years of their own ingrained beliefs and deep-seated strictures that couldn't be easily erased, especially with the indoctrination of a new and often inflammatory concept such as atheism. The master of Youngmonger is recorded to have said of the army of Iterators which spread throughout his populace after the bloody imperial compliance action that took place on his world. Better fangs chewed us through, then left these serpents honeyed tongues to turn us. For the snake is a root of our evils, and woes befall us now forth. It's very flowery, but essentially a better man conquered us. We are being left lesser men to convince us of the power of those better men. And those lesser men are snakes that are now like essentially within our society to bring us down. And, this is a good quote from Warhammer 40K because it shows the like culture of the guy that's talking, because if you read it once, you're like, what the fuck? But then if you like tear it apart, you kind of see the purpose of it, which makes a good conlang, as we talked about recently. While many compliances seemed peaceful thanks to the work of the Iterators, more often than not, the unspoken threat of the Legionis Astartes standing at their side cowed worlds into compliance rather than any eloquence or logic.
Yeah.
So in the cases that Chac brought up, where a lot of these worlds never saw war, same thing happened in the Great Crusade. The Iterators would actually go out before the Astartes. And if an Iterator and a diplomacy group could land on a planet and bring the planet to compliance, okay, done. We're done. We don't have to fight. Oh, you guys are willing to join? But a lot of times, there was a little bit of resistance. And then the Iterators would be like, well, let me speak to all of your people. And, the governor or whatever, a lot of times when the Imperium encountered an Imperium, when the capital letter I Imperium countered a lowercase I Imperium world, there was a war. But if it was a king or a baron or a duke or a governor, a lot of times there would be this kind of back and forth diplomacy. And usually the last step of that back and forth diplomacy would be Iterators and diplomatic people, like either sitting in a boardroom or standing in front of a crowd having these like, you should join us, the true humanity. Yeah. Think of any big speech from a sci-fi movie. You brought up Captain Hux yelling at all of the New Order soldiers when we were in our production meeting about this, Drew. And we talked about the pacifier from the Chronicles of Riddick movie, Chac. Like that big speech that's happening to this like world that's like peacefully complying. But is the world really who's doing the work? The guy shouting or the like fucking 100,000 soldiers with bolters standing behind him? Like, sure, it's the implication of violence rather than the practical application of violence. But still, it's the Dennis principle from Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It's the implication.
Hey, look, all I'm saying
I don't want to describe that joke. Look it up if you don't know what I'm talking about.
Laws are a threat of violence enacted by the dominant socioeconomic class in any given society. Know the rest.
We were looking up all these pictures of sci-fi and all, and I just realized, the pictures you should have put up on the screen was Kennedy and Berlin in 1961.
Yeah, I was trying to find a sci-fi version. By the way, if you guys are just listening to this, there's a video version. Join us on Patreon to see it.
Yeah, dude, it's cool.
Yeah,
but I'm just looking over the pictures right now from 1961 of him making his speech in Berlin. It's just
when we have the budget to hire artists, here's the stuff I want you to remake, but in the 40K universe. Yeah. G-Dub, when we have a budget, you already steal most of our ideas, so just pay us. That's all we want. As a pre-imperial adage goes, a mind changed against its will is of the same opinion still. A message that should have been more closely heeded. For in its haste to move on to even greater conquests, the Great Crusade left behind a string of worlds ready to reject the Iterators' platitudes, ripe for the influences of a demagogue and powers of the warp to fester and ferment rebellion against the Emperor's rule. And if you picking up what we're putting down, they fucking paved the way for Horus to retake those worlds easily. Because Horus and Erebus, Erebus in Horus's name just came back in and said, you guys were right, your old gods are real. And then even generationally removed, as Emmy kind of brought up, even generationally removed, it's way easier to fall into religion. We can even look at our own culture and our own like westernized culture, I guess I should say, as an example of this. The reason that the Romans were so successful was not because they rejected the religion of the culture they took over. And the same with the Christians. They just adopted the religion of the culture that they were subjugating. And it became easy. It became just an easy replacement. Like, oh, okay, we're not celebrating Saturnilla anymore. Now we're celebrating Christmas. Cool, whatever, same thing.
Yeah, you have the emperor coming up and going, ich bin ein Valhallander.
I like the callback to what Chac just brought up with the speech.
I like your Kennedy accent. That's fun.
I love it. But it's the whole idea behind Easter. I mean, like think about Easter for like 10
Ishtar,
fucking seconds.
Right. It's all those fertility symbols and
Jesus died for our sins so we could have chocolate rabbits and eggs.
Which are again
fertility symbols. So we can eat chocolate versions of fertility symbol. Yeah, like there's There's a lot of mixed messaging going on there.
He's like, hey guys, he died, and I went and checked in the place where we buried him. The body's gone. What do you think happened? I think some weird creep got him. Yeah, well, I think he raised from the dead. That sounds about right. Let's go with that one.
And then they get to Timmy, who's the third guy, and he's like, I don't fucking care. These chocolate eggs are fantastic. Keep giving me chocolate. I'll believe whatever you say.
You tried these eggs? These are great.
These are great, guys. It's here that we will wrap up part 1 of Sinners and Saints. Next week, we will take a look at some of the more infamous examples of iterators and remembrancers in more detail. Emmy, are you prepared? Are you prepared to deliver a speech about your thoughts on Euphrates and her bromance with Loken?
Okay, honestly, the people complain all the time about like lack of like romance or smut of any kind, but Euphrates and Loken, it's implied that things happen when Loken was out of his power armor in parts of
there's
false gods.
There's definitely that like Victorian, like unspoken romantic scene thing that happens.
Oh
in
yeah,
a couple of
there's some parts where Loken's like just walking around
and
freshly,
she's very hot and bothered about it.
out of the power armor, just out of the sparring cages, especially in those scenes before they're kind of like deployed to Davin, and that she's a photographer. I think she may have found things besides the war to photograph, and maybe some of those dirty pictures are going to MacGuffin some stuff and be resurfaced in the 42nd millennium.
It's just that the moment where she's like, "I'll be in my bunk."
I have a section here I can read actually from the book, and so Euphrates looked to Loken and said, "I'm going to have to photograph that fat glistening hog," and Loken said, "I'm happy to oblige." And he dropped trow, and they did a 45-minute long photo sesh. The end. What a good book.
Can I ask you guys?
This is
something, and we're going to do this on the Patreon segment. God. We all know that War Master Horus named his
power fist,
his dingle dangle. And what did he call it?
Man, the talons of Terra.
LBJ had Jumbo. What did Horus he had Little Horus as part of the Mournival, so I feel like that's taken.
He called it the Grav Mace.
It was his girthy man hammer.
Yeah, exactly.
The Grav
is the Warhammer 40,000.
I like it. I like it. The Grav. This is the Warhammer 30K. I just all of this transhuman psychology and all of this over muscled stuff, and we know. Canonically, lore-wise, Space Marines are essentially asexual because the sexual need has been programmed.
Horus had a really big dick, and I can't prove that.
They're war units.
I think he's got a micro penis, actually.
Yeah. I think all of.
Well, I was just gonna say they all have cum gutters. They all have that sharp V cum gutter. I mean, we've seen.
Actually, this is. Do you want to know? How the heresy actually started? Seriously.
Their hogs shrank up when they took all the extra testosterone.
Horus has a micro penis, and it was made fun of by
Dorn.
Robert and Dorn. And, you just got to be careful with people with guys that have micros, because they'll turn on you and kill you. And that's how the heresy started.
I just want to say, in Emmy's absolute defense, I think you're right, but slightly off, Chac. Erebus had a micro penis because Erebus is actually the one who architected the whole fucking thing.
Yeah, Erebus again.
He was sad that no remembrancers were taking photos of his glistening hog,
of his dark crucis. He's like, nobody wants to come take pictures of my dark crucis.
Exactly. Those ladies did not want to get micro needled. They were just They were not here for that.
That's not
and
a pole I
you're
can
right.
dance on.
You know, Erebus being that he is just a despicable human being, there has to be something beyond just kind of like what's in the canon with the Scorpion game and all of that that's got him acting this way.
He's a really interesting bad guy.
He's a very interesting guy.
interestingly written bad guy. And he really is a villain. As much as we kind of always try to play to the fact that there are no good guys in 40K, there are definitely villains.
Bad guys. Yeah.
There are definitely
Erebus
worse people
is, like,
than the background
when I think
of bad.
about like characters in Warhammer in any, setting, whether it's the old world or the 40K setting, Erebus is like truly like he has no redeeming qualities and just generally doesn't seem to have any motivation to cause chaos besides I'm going to be bad.
He's a
And
very
I
angry,
feel
broken
very much the
person.
same way about Erebus that I do about Nagash in terms of
Yes.
like his motivations.
Oh yeah, Nagash is also a very angry, broken
Nagash
person.
was like, I want to fuck my brother's wife. I
Yeah.
want to put the Bass Pro Shop pyramid on the moon. I want to fight the rats.
But the rats were like, what do you mean?
Pro
The
Shop
moon's,
pyramid on the
moon's
moon.
made of cheese.
Exactly. And, and just neither one of these people, right? Like, there are some real bad guys. Like, I don't know. Angron has done some things that aren't so great, but we also know that Angron has a lot of like deep-seated issues and resentment and had this awful,
And he,
horrific, traumatic childhood.
And he doesn't have a choice.
And he doesn't have a choice.
Yeah.
Erebus, on the other hand, was just like, you know what? I think I liked killing animals and pulling the legs off of spiders and insects as a child.
Textbook
I
sociopath,
think I'm just
right?
going to do that on a bigger scale with some Astartes. And there's that book, Child of Chaos, where it's kind of like him in his own words.
Yeah.
It's so well written, y'all.
When Logar wrote his fifth and kind of unknown book that was all about Erebus and Erebus's like treaties and everything, it was the DSM 3159.
Mm-hmm.
And by then,
all about Erebus. These are all your mental problems, buddy. Like you got them all. Erebus is an interesting character. Both Erebus and Corferon are interesting characters, and I kind of wonder if we're only getting half the story. But yeah. Well, if you guys want to get into contact with us about this episode or the show itself, you can do that by reaching out through email at underthehiveofmadness@gmail.com.
You can join our growing community on Discord and become part of the conversation about existing lore, world building, gaming, and much more. You can find the podcast on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, or check out our website at underthehiveofmadness.com. You can check out our link tree to find links to keep up with everyone in the cast's progress on hobbies and other projects.
Help the podcast grow by liking and reviewing us wherever you get your podcasts fix. Our home is on Spotify, but you can find us on Audible, Apple Podcasts, CastBox, iHeartRadio, Radio Public, and more. As always, links and spellings can be found in our show notes.
Support us through Patreon at www.patreon.com/underthehiveofmadness. Join a fantastic crew of hivers for access to extra content and a chance to snag some cool merch in our monthly giveaways.
Frank's Rocket Truck, the roaming feast that brings flavor to the post-apocalyptic streets. Always looking to unlock bold new tastes, you can finally rejoice with Frank's new seared rat chimichurri fries and pick up a hand cannon or two while you eat.
Working hard to be everything the Arbites warned you about, all while shattering whatever's left of the piece. We are 665.66 UHMR Chemrat Radio, reminding all of you Chemrats, Hive Mice, and some ghoulies to keep those dials fixed right here. Same ratty frequency for a dose of the same ratty-ass attitude.
Hiveborn, where will you flee? From the four-armed emperors waiting for thee. With claws that rend and eyes that gleam, they haunt your steps and stalk your scream. Down in the frost hollow, cold and grim, their whispered prayers, a heretic hymn. So bolt your doors and bar them tight, or they'll claim your soul before the light.
Remember to read a book.
And brush your goddamn teeth.
Hydrate and don't loot the corpses.
All right, guys, good night.